Spectrum wants to hear your views. You can SMS at any time during the show. Type Spectrum, leave a space, type in your contribution and name, then send it to 7197. Your views, our interviews on Spectrum, Radio 1 FM 90.
Hello, you're welcome to Spectrum Radio. I'm your host Edmond. Kizito. Good evening. On Spectrum tonight, review the week. Some of the issues we'll be looking at: the deadly Ebola outbreak. 16 people have been confirmed dead. A prisoner escaped from Kagadi Hospital today after being admitted for treatment. We'll look at that and what the Ministry of Health has done to contain the outbreak. We'll talk about the Clinton visit to Uganda. Hillary Clinton, U.S. Secretary of State, is in Kampala to discuss regional issues with the President of Uganda, President Museveni. He went to South Sudan to Salva Kiir. He's asked those people to agree to talk so they can move forward, South Sudan and Sudan. The 19th coronation of the Kabaka, the corruption scandal in the office of the Prime Minister, and Ethiopians care. What it means if Meles Zenawi, President of Ethiopia, is in bad. Our guests tonight, Mr. Vincent Mayanja, Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party. You're most welcome, Mr. Mayanja.
Thank you, Edmond, and good evening, listeners and viewers.
We're also joined by Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, Legal Consultant at AKIJUL, a commentator also on political and social affairs. You're most welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
We expect to be joined by Hon Stephen Mukitaale Birahwa, Member of Parliament for Buliisa County and Chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on the National Economy. We expect him to join us in a short while. Vincent, how has the Ugandan government handled the Ebola outbreak?
Well, I think it is the most outrageous thing to even think about it, that you have 3 outbreaks that are fatal. The first one claimed over 200 lives, the second one over 40. But even on the third, we are not prepared to handle such a calamity. It is quite disheartening. We have to join in mourning the dead. Uganda should stop losing its medical practitioners because of things like Ebola outbreak. I think it is very unfortunate. It's a vote of confidence in our health system, and it highlights the way we prioritize our issues as a country, because health must be on the top of our agenda, and we should really, at this time, I think the government should have deployed protective gears to all government medical facilities for Ebola, because we have had 3 outbreaks. We have had numerous Marburg outbreaks. If we cannot learn from that, then we do not have a place in being leaders in this country, and we really need to think and redraw our plan. That's how I see the situation.
Are you saying that because you come from the opposition?
No. Ebola does not discriminate. I don't know the political affiliation of all those that have died, the 16 that have died. I don't know their affiliation, and Ebola did not discriminate them because they are either opposition or they support the government. It came, and it is a natural calamity. We have to address it squarely as opposition. In fact, the other one time I was on Ugandans at Heart, and somebody was doing politics about it, that maybe government was lying. I wrote back and said, you are yourself, but we are listening to WHO, we are listening to the Minister of Health, we are listening to the Virus Research Institute, and they are telling us that there is Ebola, and why do you want us to believe you? Really, this is beyond politics. We need to look at the welfare of our people and really address the issues they are in.
Nicholas, would you agree?
Well, in times such as this, we need to call our national spirit and look at the country as Uganda and begin to look at the broader picture of what has befallen our country. Whether it is Ebola in Western Uganda or nodding disease in Northern Uganda, I think we need to transcend our different platforms and call ourselves to be true Ugandans in this respect. And I think that in looking at this problem, we've got to look at it in that sense. But that said, I think that there is a delicate situation here that we have to balance, because never before has the President of the Republic of Uganda, not since the HIV/AIDS days, taken to prime time national television to warn Ugandans of what he thought was an impending calamity. So I think this is a serious problem. I do think that the delicate balance we've got to strike is telling Ugandans the truth and the fear of causing panic in this country. That's a delicate balance, because if the government doesn't tell us the full extent of the problem,
yes,
then you risk having an epidemic that is slowly growing and catching up with other areas of the country. And yet, at the same time, if they then raise the alarm level, you're bound to cause panic and disrupt activities in the country. So I think in an attempt to strike that balance, the government has been very careful with the kind of information it is releasing. But I do have a sense that the extent of the problem is much bigger than what we are being told. Because if you have an entire family being wiped out of Ebola,
of 10 people,
1 month ago, and then the confirmation for Ebola comes up weeks later,
about 16 days later,
then you can only imagine the extent of the contact between affected people and these guys who have died.
Yes.
So the problem actually might be bigger than what we are actually being made to understand. And I think that we need to have very clear information on the extent of the spread of this disease. For instance, I worry that if this disease strikes Kampala, with the way we stand, we are cramped up in taxis, in pioneer buses, it is going to be catastrophic. So I think that we need to manage that information very carefully, and that the state needs to do better, as opposed to having, Professor Ephraim Kamuntu coming on radio and really not being so coherent, not being very convincing. We need to have a very clear message from government of the extent of this disease, of what we need to do to avoid the spread, because when this broke out in Gulu, I was in Gulu, the entire cultural and social setup of the society had to change. People were not greeting each other, people were not shaking hands, people were not gathering for funerals. In fact, even people who died were just buried 5 minutes after your death. There were no funeral rites. And yet we seem to move on here in Kampala as if everything is normal. The second point I want to make is the overall question of the status of our healthcare system in the country. I think that epidemics such as this do expose really, very glaringly, the extent of the malfunction of our healthcare system. Because if you have a healthcare system that is incapable of responding to an epidemic with such speed as is required, if you have an epidemic that you still have to take blood samples from Kagadi to Entebbe and take months to test, then you have a serious problem. If you have a healthcare system...
It didn't take months to test.
Well, it took us 1 month to confirm this disease, and 9 people had died. So I think that we have a healthcare system that is hugely reliant, in my view, on donor support. That on our own, once these things break out, we have to run to WHO, CDC, go to the Carter Center. We don't seem to have that preparedness to respond quickly and save lives in our country. The third point that I wish to make is the overall safety of the men and women who are struggling day and night to save these lives. We lost Dr. Lukuya in Gulu, a brilliant doctor who had actually been the best student at the Liverpool University and was offered a job. He refused, came back in this country, and in the course of his duty, he lost his life. So I think that we need to take very carefully and address it seriously, the protection we offer our healthcare workers. Because I'm told people who are carrying dead bodies didn't have gloves. At some stage, didn't have gloves. Even those who had gloves had these Chinese gloves that would tear, would break if you're trying to fit your hand into them. So I think we need to look at that very carefully, because these are the contacts people between the patients and the public, that if you don't take care of them, you risk then multiplying this disease and causing a very, very serious problem in this country.
In your view, what's the extent of the virus that has not been told?
I don't want to cause panic, because whatever I say here might cause panic all over town and whatever it is. But I think that the people who are in control, the Minister of Health, she was on this radio yesterday, or I mean a few days ago.
She was here last night.
Yeah, last night. I mean, I heard her, but I think that she was being guarded. The people who are handling this disease must be very, very forthwith in terms of coming up with a strong campaign. And see, we can do it. When the HIV/AIDS virus struck this country, we did it. It was magnificent. There is so much commitment to fighting HIV/AIDS. That commitment, we can recall that commitment again now and begin to teach our people basic ways of avoiding this disease. I've been in town today, and everybody who I know, who I meet, has been shaking my hand, hugging me and greeting me. Nobody seemed to care that somebody just died in Mulago.
They were giving you an elbow.
No, they were shaking me and really hugging me. You know. So I think it is important that we need to begin to say
the awareness is still low.
Awareness is extremely
but
low.
obviously they've said they've dispatched this protective jet to all the hospitals. I mean, we have not had any new cases reported.
Even if you do that, I think within the public, you could have, a case. There's a guy who you've just had on the news, ran away from the medical facility. So you then have a possibility of that coming out. So you then must begin to prepare the people in the villages, in town, in every area in this country that has possible contact, to prepare. Because if you don't prepare, this thing is damn dead dangerous. I saw it in Gulu. If it came here, the entire city would be in very, very serious, very serious trouble.
Listeners, this is Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight we are reviewing the week. Our guests, Mr. Vincent Mayanja, Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party, Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, legal consultant at AKIJUL, a commentator on political affairs and social ones as well. We've just been joined by our third guest, Hon Stephen Mukitaale Birahwa, Member of Parliament for Buliisa County, Chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on the National Economy from the NRM. Honorable Birahwa, you're most welcome.
Good evening, listeners. Thank you, Edmond, Nicholas, and Vincent for being here on the panel.
How did the government handle the Ebola virus, in your view?
Condolences to the bereaved families, and I'm from the bereaved kingdom of Bunyoro. Want to thank whoever government and whoever has raised the concern against the epidemic, and I also want to thank government for the effort so far done, but I want to, as we did discuss in Parliament, and as Nicholas has been putting it, one thing seems clear, that there were very little lessons learned from the earlier Ebola epidemic which took the late Lukuya. May his soul rest in peace. So the occupational hazards still continues to be a problem, and the fact that we lost some weeks before confirming that the incidents, that there was a possibility of a recurrence of an incidence of what had happened years earlier, aware that with climate change the probability of recurrence of such epidemics is much more, because they are much more environment which makes it possible. So the lesson is that it doesn't look like all medical workers across the country have the alert, have the awareness. Otherwise, the symptoms were imminent, and in 2-3 days it should have been confirmed. Two, I want to thank the media stations which have helped so much in putting some message. But as I did raise in Parliament the other day, I think to leave it to Ministry of Health alone is not enough. We need to see a more interministerial activities. We have been informed there's a task force, but the activities from different ministries are required to the effect that there's so many FM radios, we have print and electronic media, would be seeing these messages strongly on the media. You don't see them. So I would like to request the editorial of different media houses to make it as they are not only corporate placement, but I think it's only good for them to have taken this message serious. By now, the alert would be real. But you don't see that semblance of alertness with all these radios, and in fact you hear some jokes on some of our country radios. So we as a country, we still have a challenge of lacking the quick response mechanism to be able to immediately make response. And fine, people discuss the occupational hazards that come with medical workers. We may not have the money ready for such incidences, but I think the best way is to be proactive, is to be preventive. Of course, as a believer, I would say such an epidemic reveals to us that there is an Almighty Creator. If it wasn't for His mercy, anything can happen. I was watching the other incidents and a tsunami across in Asia, and I said, if this came to Uganda, what would happen? So, by grace of God, we survived so many things, and I think even Ebola will be there, because if Ebola ever spread in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, aware that it is more than 99% a lethal epidemic, I don't know what would happen. So by God's grace we are there, but I think let me commend the interministerial task force put in place by government, and as Parliament we've said whatever resources available should be already provided to that effect. No. The good thing now that at least our internal laboratories can now detect. What I'm saying is that those on ground delayed to confirm that there was a risk. If the samples had gone immediately, possibly the incidence would have been less.
All right, let's move on to something else. The Hillary Clinton visit to Uganda. The Secretary of State is in the country to discuss several regional issues with President Museveni. High on the agenda is the DRC conflict, situation in Somalia, South Sudan, and Uganda itself. The Foreign Affairs Ministry says this visit is an affirmation that Uganda is working out well in foreign policy matters within the region. What do you read in Secretary Clinton's visit, Honorable Birahwa?
Yeah, clearly Uganda, before I even talk about today, those who knew about the Cold War, Uganda was between what they call the red and blue line. The fight, the proxy wars between the communists and the capitalists. Uganda was there was a fight. Where does Uganda belong? But also, it's not a secret that Uganda is instrumental in the current stability in Somalia. Uganda did contribute at one time for some sanity in DRC. Uganda did contribute in what is now seen as the renaissance of Rwanda. Uganda helped to liberate Southern Sudan. So clearly, beyond our domestic politics, in the geopolitics of the Great Lakes, you cannot whisk away the role of Uganda, and nobody in the Western powers can dismiss that. I was somewhere with Nicholas discussing the same subject. So,
I'm not going to go to
and it hadn't been announced that people was coming, but I was just preparing members to know that we have been playing that role. But also, it's important that Uganda has made some strides in some efforts, though at times we seem to be having some setbacks. But the role of such international powers is always to encourage us to move on. I'm sure they are very much, there are things they may not discuss in the open, but they would want to see us move slightly more. This oil discovery, some people think it's a small thing. It's not. I can put the positive and the negative using the SWOT analysis. The oil discovery has a lot of opportunities for Uganda and for the international business. But for us as a country, those who call ourselves political leaders, those who look at the threats that come with it, there are so many now interested who would want to see what the dynamics that come with this money. So we need to have a very balanced position when we are discussing all this.
Vincent, Mayanja.
Well, I would just start by saying that I love the tenacity of Secretary of State, Rhoda Clinton, that she's at every spot that has a problem. But for the visit in this region, I would say that, her work was cut out for her, and by the United States, because the mess we are going through, to me, was started by the United States.
M23 rebels.
Well, it is all. This is just a symptom of a bigger problem. This region has been. When you look at the conflict in Southern Sudan, you find the American footprint everywhere with it. When you look at Somalia, you find them there. When you look at the DR Congo, of course, they have they propped up Mobutu, and Mobutu became what he became, and they wanted to come and mop up the situation. Now they are coming back mop up that situation. But more importantly, I know that the Americans are coming out here because of their wider interests. More importantly, maybe is peace. I would imagine to see that this region is peaceful, but also their interest in trade, because the DR Congo really is one of those countries that are endowed with a lot of resources and things like that. So it becomes a very, very good business destination for any country that requires investment. So coming here, they are trying to do that. Then when you look at the government in Kigali, who propped it up? It's the Americans. So if they
just said Uganda.
well, Uganda has always been the Trojan horse of the West, and we have been doing the work of the West. But I really think that when they come here, they are going to talk sense into many of the leaders around, because this conflict in the DRC can become an African war, because you can see Angola in there, you can see Zimbabwe in there, and it is not by accident that the president of Uganda was in Angola the other day. It is all about this. They want to diffuse what might come. But I hope that Honorable Rodham Clinton is going to talk sense into these leaders, and they really think at the wider interest of this region about peace and tranquility.
If I can just make 2 quick points. Yes. The first is that I think the excitement really manifested by the Foreign Affairs Minister's statement that Clinton's visit is an endorsement of our internal governance. I think is really, in my view, premature, because just look at the countries Clinton has visited. She's gone to Senegal, a very key close neighbor to Mali, an area where you have a rebellion, an Al-Qaeda linked rebellion. She then leaves Senegal and comes to Khartoum, an area which is up north with Sudan, an Arab-leaning, Al-Qaeda-linked government in the north. She then comes where next? Kampala. Kampala, an area that is very strategic in terms of its involvement in the DRC, but also its nexus with the government of Rwanda, which is having problems with the US government, but also our involvement in Somalia. So the entire visit, in my view, is because of US strategic interest as opposed to an endorsement of our own domestic politics. Sure. Because the US, like it or not, has had a significant policy shift in as far as their dealing with Kagame is concerned. They've cut military aid, they have cut real economic aid, they have chief advisors of the government of the US have made statements in the press that indicate a huge policy shift with Rwanda, and that needs to be navigated properly given Rwanda's nexus to Uganda. So I think that Clinton's visit is purely US strategic interest, and again that shows you that even if countries are going into elections, they are preparing for their country's interest going forward. Okay. You must take advantage of that. Lastly, and just wrap it up very briefly.
Maybe let's break now. We'd like to hear a little bit more of that. This is Spectrum Radio. We're going for a break. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
It's fantastic! It's fun! It's Crazy Fridays from MTN! Look out for unbelievable deals every Friday from MTN! MTN. Everywhere you go.
John, Mike and I, we go back a bit. We knew John at the beginning, working for someone else. But he was different. He had vision, saw opportunities. He started working towards his goal, opened his own garage, and worked, learning the hard way. His reputation spread. Trust, consistency, quality. Soon people were coming to him from all parts. He made himself and his whole street prosper, and also helped friends, seeing potential in people and helping them on. But John never shouts about all his success. He is just who he is. Special.
So here's to one like John, who make a difference, who enjoy Now Special, the rich, satisfying taste from the source. Now Special.
You've earned it. Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back to Spectrum on Radio 1. Tonight we're reviewing the week. Our guests, Hon Stephen Birahwa, Buliisa County MP, Chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on the National Economy, Mr. Vincent Mayanja, Deputy Secretary General of the Democratic Party, and Mr. Nicholas Opiyo, Political and Social Affairs Commentator. He's a legal consultant at AKIJUL. You can send your text message to 7197 to comment on tonight's discussion. That is Spectrum message, question or comment. Send it to 7197. Nicholas, we're looking at Hillary Clinton's visit. She landed today. She landed last night, went to Sudan, then came back here. Give us your analysis on.
Well, just to pick up from where I left, beyond the American interest, and again, this is the problem of African governments, is that we then do not take our national interest very seriously. We are then quick to associate with the Western powers and not make the case for our own interest. So I think that the visit of Hillary Clinton gives us an opportunity to drive the point for about Uganda's interest in the region. We know very well that Uganda will face significant threats owing to the resource conflict that is emerging in the region. We must protect Uganda's interest against, hostile neighbors, and of course make the point for the LRA, arrest of Joseph Kony, which the US has committed resources and human power to it. But also lastly, make the point that the US must begin to take very seriously questions of domestic governance in our country, because they are one of the biggest donors in our country. The entire health sector, the entire agricultural sector benefits a lot from US funded initiatives. We then must make points to them to invest in democratic processes, develop parties like the NRM, like the DP, so that this country going forward is a much more solid, solid country. I think that whining and dining with her with only the interest of a few Western powers may not necessarily help our country. We must steal the initiative, take it back, and make the point that, look, for too long we have been proxies of American interest in the region. We have been subcontractors of America's war in Somalia. I think it is time we begin to look at our country and develop systems and processes in our country that will hold this country going forward 10 years from now.
Yeah, but however, one point I want to clarify is that even with the Western interest in Africa, it is a responsibility of African Union, of African countries, for our stability, for our peace and security, because the peace in the region is our responsibility. So even when the Americans have an interest, it is up to us to sieve and see, is stability in Somalia a good thing? Because what you call the Al-Shabaab in Somalia is a bombing at Lugogo, is a bombing at Mombasa. So it's not only a threat to the Americans, it's actually more of a threat to us as a neighbor. And that's why we should not even wait for the facilitation of support from the US to do it. It's Uganda in its own right.
It's our primary responsibility.
But I think the West has to do one simple thing. We need to emphasize one thing, is that their interests are better guarded when this region is stable. They should never do anything.
So they shouldn't prop up dictators.
They should never prop up dictators. They should invest in institutions that promote human rights. They should invest in institutions.
That is long-term strategic.
Yes.
But there are tactical approaches to manage.
Well, they have been doing this for 40 years.
Let's move forward. Let's talk about the Kabaka. This week, the Kabaka of Uganda, Vincent Mayanja, the Kabaka was marked 19 years since he was crowned. At the ceremony, the Kabaka insisted that Uganda will continue to pursue a peaceful route to recover all its properties, including land that is still under the central government. Reports have said that the central government owes Buganda 22 billion shillings in rent arrears of properties. Now, this week, President Museveni gave 2 billion shillings to repair the Kasubi. How do you read these coincidences?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate His Majesty the Kabaka upon this 19th anniversary of his coronation. But more importantly, we need to tell the central government that, it is very good and we welcome their contribution towards the rehabilitation of the Kasubi tombs that were gutted by fire about a year or so ago. But what is more important here is that, yes, you are bringing these 2 billion shillings as a contribution to the construction. But almost a year after a report was handed over to you over how this, fire came about, you have not released it to the public. I think this money should come with the report itself, and it will be really very good because we need to know. Maybe you are investing $2 billion shillings to rebuilding the Kasuri tombs, and the next day you find that it is burnt again. We need to find out who burnt it. Maybe you are going to construct it and somebody burns it again. Is it the weakness with us as the people in charge, the Baganda, or is it the government? We need to know that. Then secondly, before even you give the 2 billion, I think if these people are asking for their areas in rent, you clear that also.
It's a lot of money.
But I think we should really not underscore the contribution of 2 billion shillings. It is very much welcome, but we need to look at other things. And the Kabaka's government is still demanding a few properties here and there that I think government would lose nothing if they release them. That's how I see the situation. But the coincidences, I think the government is trying to bridge those gaps that had really developed between the central government and the Kabaka's establishment.
President Museveni also met the NRM caucus, the Buganda caucus.
The Buganda caucus, yes, it had some altercations where some...
At short notice?
Yeah, at short notice, some members boycotted, others went.
What was the strategy there?
I think he wanted really to take them. That's what he does, President Museveni, that when he wants to pass on a message, he doesn't want you to get prepared. You just go there, then he says...
Let's look at the coincidence if you don't...
he wanted to do it. He wanted to do it after the anniversary, meet the MPs, hand over the check, and it will remain in the news, and you really compete with the whatever fanfare the Kabaka developed.
The color of the cloud will be yellow.
Yeah.
Nicholas.
Well, you see, first and foremost, you've got to congratulate the Kabaka on his 19th anniversary. I think it is admirable, and you see, you've got to give it to these hospital Buganda people for their undying love for this kingdom. I think the only one single factor in Buganda that unites all Buganda is their cultural values and their love for the kingdom. And you've got to give it to them for that. Because I come from a place where people push the chief in the line in the banking hall,
Really?
So I think
the rot?
Oh yeah, I mean, nobody gives a damn about him, So the thing then is that you've got to give it to the Buganda for their love for their kingdom. That's admirable. I wish we could harness that to the benefit of our country, to the benefit of Uganda, to ensure national unity. The second point that I wish to make is you see, Buganda and central government is like a husband and a wife who got married, they have made promises to each other, I will love you till I die, you have children, and midway through the marriage, it has broken down, and you have a disgruntled wife and a very disobedient husband, you see. That is how I describe Buganda, because I think that certain promises were made to Buganda Kingdom in the Luwero War. We know for a fact that the Buganda Kabaka himself went down there to govern as support for the NRA, now NRM. So I think that some things were promised to him and they haven't been given. I think it is just fair to keep your word, be honest, and return Buganda Kingdom properties. I mean, Buganda Kingdom had to evict Mengo Chief Magistrate's Court from its building. Reason? Rent hasn't been paid. So I think those issues must be resolved, because for too long we have been at it and we haven't resolved it. Thirdly, I think President Museveni's gestures must be taken as an olive branch, as an acceptance to return to the table to negotiate with the Buganda Kingdom. And you've got to appreciate that. Even though the coincidence might appear, suspicious, but I think that those are very strong indications of the president willing to come back, negotiate with the Kabaka, and hear him out, and then reach a conclusion. I only hope that this time he's serious, because they've been at this for long. They've discussed with the Kabaka, done this, made promises and failed to do it. I hope that this marriage will become a happy marriage again. because I think that Buganda has credible issues that must be attended to if the Buganda kingdom and central government are supposed to get along. And thirdly, I mean, lastly, and on the issue of Buganda MPs, just again, I think that President Museveni has been using all avenues to reach the Kabaka. You had him complain that he has functions, nobody invites him, he said they invite his ministers. Yes. So I think he is a desperate man who wants to reach out to this kingdom that he thinks is important. And I think that he wanted to use the MPs, who are, for all intents and purposes, very influential, in their own kingdom. And I think that the MPs missed an opportunity to go and put their case before the president and ask the president that if you want to come back to the table this time, be serious. Be serious.
Honorable Birahwa.
Yeah, I always don't want to discuss symptoms. Because one would do, as I congratulate my,
But that's what the prognosis is.
I am an in-law because Kabaka Yasim, I married from Mamba clan. So I congratulate the Kabaka. But of course, the Kabaka would be celebrating slightly more than 19 years. If the earlier governments had allowed the institution of Kabaka to. So you can't take it away from the NRM and President Museveni who gave that. But I don't want to be that parochial. I want to lift the debate to another level. That as we celebrate 50 years of independence, we need to redefine the role of a modern cultural institution in a modern state. What clearly shows that there is a lot of following of the institution. And I'm not saying the Baganda, I'm saying Buganda. Because Buganda, like Bunyoro, is not a tribe. It was a nation state, apart from the colonial distortion. And therefore, these people can do very well in terms of poverty alleviation, in terms of environmental protection, tree planting, food security. This couple can be cleaned if we gave them that budget. However, because of the history of Uganda, the caution in the constitution making did not give them the latitude which allows them to play that role. And therefore they are denied the budget item and they are limited to be a cultural institution. Yet the constitution says they are trustees. So for me, the debate I would want to engage, it may not be my party position for now, is that we need to define the role of cultural institutions. By the way, plus the religious institutions. These people do not spend money to call anybody. People just spontaneously organize. And therefore we can use that capacity. They actually have an excess capacity of mobilization, of community work, or of Vulungi which they can play. So they need a vote. The 2 billion we are talking about, we should actually own up the ugly past and stop discussing, because what you're demanding was not taken by NRM. What you're demanding was taken by the post-colonial state. But also, what Uganda got in the colonial era was an injustice to some area. So I don't want to be a balanced citizen. Not because those counties are from Bunyoro. I'm only being balanced. So I don't know. I want to have a national focus. If it means the truth and reconciliation, we move on to another level and say, what can all these cultural, and when I talk of regional tire, I know the regional tire provides for the cultural institution as a titular head. It would be, by the way, I always want to convince my in-laws in Uganda. It's a very good foundation. In the evolution, we are talking about like something like integration. You don't just move and say federal. A regional tire is a very good foundation to create a beginning of all districts in that region, getting the resources, you plan as a region, and the titular head is a cultural leader. So I really don't understand why we have that standoff. Regional tire is constitutional. I'm happy the bill has come to Parliament. That's where money for what this. But me, I believe NAD should be in some of these institutions, cultural institutions and faith-based. That's my belief.
They should handle NAD.
NAD would have done better if it was
run by the churches.
By the churches and UPE and USE, I can tell you, the schools which are doing well have foundation bodies. Tell me a school owned by LOC which is doing very well in Uganda. It's not there. So we are not inventing a way.
In fact, together they own about 60% of all schools.
What I would want us to do in NRM is to review some of these policies. Education in Uganda wasn't introduced by any party, it was by the missionaries. Why don't we allow them to do better? There is no stealing of drugs in Menga and in Zambia. Why? And Kiwudi. They get a very small budget, but they have a better service. So these are areas we need to engage. without being parochial, without being sentimental, without being tribal. We can do a lot, the kingdom can do a lot, but all the same, we congratulate the kingdom. And the kingdoms are not about to substitute a government, because they are not elected. And they should not, they don't need to be adversarial. We need a complementary role of a modern cultural institution in a modern state. That debate, as a country, we have sided out from it. We need to have courage to do that.
What happened to the cultural leaders bill anyway that Parliament passed? I thought that was supposed to intended to do that, exactly what you say.
Against the background, you see, the constitution limited the latitude. I want them to get slightly more mandate, because they can do better, they can do more. All these hills would be planted in Uganda if we wanted. If wetlands were given to cultural institutions, where would these guys, investors, going them? Where would they be coming from?
Nicholas, who paid the money? Was this President Museveni's private money? Was it?
No, of course not. This is government money, you know. Yeah. But I think I do agree with the Honorable, the point that he makes, that at both ends of the discussions we are engaged in short-termism, you know, and you know, quick gains, as opposed to long-term coexistence beyond the 5 years or the 5 years of President Museveni tenure in power.
You are depending on the magnanimity of President Museveni to give 2 billion. That is to be a budget item. That's where we should be.
Let's talk about the corruption in the Prime Minister's scandal. Jeffrey Kazinda, with a big house in Bukoto, he builds and destroys and builds and so on. It's a house constantly under construction. He was jailed, released on police bond, rearrested again. Nicholas, what undercurrents do you read in this? Do you think there are people who have not been arrested who still are?
Well, first and foremost, as a judicial, as an officer of court, this matter is being investigated. So I may not delve into the details of this case. But again, just want to reflect on this whole question of, you know, people are, you know, driven by events. One event comes and goes and comes and goes.
Bicycles come.
You know, bicycles comes and, you know, they come and go. National ID comes and goes. It's like a season. We just keep moving on, you know. We don't seem to read the trend. I think if Ugandans only put their heads together and begin to see that this is not merely an happenance, but rather a growing symptom of an endemic problem in this country, then we would then begin to take seriously these issues. Because, you know, even newspapers, even journalists, you know, we get these stories, run away with it for, you know, 1-2 weeks. Believe me, if a bigger story broke out tomorrow, Kazinda is gone. Before you know it, like Jim Mwezi, like Mike Mukula, they are being acquitted, the cases are being defeated. There is a bigger problem. In fact, I'm now beginning to believe that there is a deep state, a secret, corrupt clique that, you know, at different level that run the state in this country, that are involved in fleecing taxpayers of the hard-earned money. Be it primary school teachers, be it doctors, be it district councillors.
You think it all ends up in one hole?
It may not end up in one hole, but there is a shadow that is, it's a shadow that is sucking the spirit out of us, sucking our money out of us at every level. So it's a monster, and I think that this posturing of we're fighting corruption, you know, whatever it is, I don't think it is serious enough. We need to begin to examine the systematic. How did we get to a stage where you have an accounts officer in the OPM's, OPM, having access to all this kind of money is undetected? You know, what happened to the systems? What happened to supervision? You know, then you must begin to question: is the PS really in control? Is he really competent to hold that position? Are his commissioners, all the ministers in there, are they competent to actually superintend over these kind of things? I think it's a deeper problem, not just discussing the one fat Kazinda who is now in detention.
No, first and foremost, I don't need really to make a lot of argument on this case for one reason, that wherever a case comes up in court and the public has a certain viewpoint, we were discussing it last week, that maybe that influenced the outcome of the court process. But surely we need to address ourselves to the general problem of corruption in this country. My colleague, Mr. Opiyo, has stated it, that there is no way somebody in a government department can come across or can access that amount of money and is not detected. It can't happen. Wow, after so many years. Then secondly, Well, you are mentioning it here that he was transferred from the Ministry of Water and Environment, where he was doing the same things, which means that, you know, there are some people in government that helped him to make that transfer, and he has been working with other people. I hope the police is going to go down there and really bust this clique, bust this cartel, if they can, if they have the capacity to do that. But we need to look at the general political goodwill to fight corruption, and I commend the honorables here who have been trying to do that in Parliament. They are trying to do it. I hope the executive will do it, and even the police will be insulated.
But the government is investigating corruption very, very good. You know what happened this week? Muhwezi was let free after thorough investigations. Mukula is in trouble.
That's what I'm saying, that you need a good political goodwill, that when we find anybody corrupt, then the law must take its course up to the latter.
Nicholas, let's hear from you, Nicholas.
Just chip in quickly, and again, I've been privy to investigations by police. Somewhat, don't ask me how. Is you have a police force that then goes to the OPM's office and is following a voucher of 50,000 shillings of who went to a workshop in Jinja, how much allowance did he get. You have a police force that is looking at a balance sheet printed by the ministry, you know, and yet you know very well that these balance sheets can be altered. Instead of going and looking at the backups at Bank of Uganda, looking at the backups at the Ministry of Finance, nobody has taken that initiative to go there, even when it has been suggested. You know, you then have a very rather, in my view, myopic investigation that is being done. And again, the whole thing is about Kazinda, which receipts he signed. I think there's a bigger problem that I think that the police needs to get into and dig out the truth.
I personally believe that corruption is a capital offense, and want to be guilty until proven innocent.
So reverse the honor
and they should attach whatever is suspected, not confirmed, whatever is suspected to be their property until they are proven.
Even that house in
But of course,
like a hotel.
Nicholas, for the rule of law and the DP will say that is against the rule of law. So that's part of it. I personally drove to Kazinda's house some years ago, about a year or two ago.
You won't recognize it now?
No, I wanted to get breakfast.
That was a hotel.
There's an MP, I will not mention a neighbor, just opposite the gate. I was supposed to see him and he wasn't picking the phone. So I said, why don't I get a cup of tea here?
Go to this hotel.
Before we go, I go with...
That was 2 years ago? If you went there, I was recognized twice or 3 times the size.
I was choosing to go to the compound and they were ushering me in as a visitor because I looked dignified. But I was preferring the ambience in the compound. They said, but it's somebody's home. So I entered the gate. But the other controversy I want to say, if all the corrupt government workers and those who deal with government in the so-called private sector were entrepreneurs like Asians, would not have youth unemployment. They would be investing in modern farms. All this land they have grabbed would be producing something, would be having various on agriculture. But
would that excuse the very...
No, I said I'm from the controversy.
Okay.
But unfortunately, these guys put money in West.
All right.
It's just in a home. But I want to move to the real issue. I have always said here on this program and others, there is a nexus between privatization, liberalization, rollback of the state, and corruption. The days of my father, where a public servant had a government house and government transport, only built a house for retirement. This disease of people owning government houses came with these Bretton Woods policies of privatization, of liberalization. People started by owning their pajamas, they started owning Kololo houses, now they from Kololo to Muyenga to Naguru.
So they
become insatiable. So we have not delineated between being a government worker and being a dealer. So you end up with, and by the way, Kazina is only a symptom. He can only be taking a percent, a commission of about 2%. Who has taken the 98%? Right. So that's a very big problem. So But it also means Uganda will have enough money to do vocational schools per sub-county. We have enough money to sort out all these problems we're having.
Our time is running short.
We just need to possibly deny this for the money and put to where it's supposed to be. But how I wish we're allowing that these people are criminal, are guilty, until everything suspected is attached until proved innocent.
Well, our time is up. Our time is almost up, but we got a comment from Martin. Martin Amo says he had President Museveni had appointed secondly the vice president to handle Buganda affairs. Now he prefers to work with the Buganda caucus. Does that mean he's lost confidence in his VP, the one that cannot be intimidated?
Vice president is part of the Buganda caucus, and he has actually attended the two caucuses. So I have
no confidence.
And I'm not aware that currently there is no communication between the kingdom and because the prime minister was not invited that day. He was invited. They must have agreed much earlier, but I think because the Kabaka had the celebration, the 3 days were busy in Entebbe and Ansan, and so there is no way the president would have pushed them to another date. For me, what is important is let us go beyond the symptomatic things. These cultural institutions can do a lot. We thank President Museveni and interim government for bringing them back, but let's allow them the latitude to do what they have the natural potential beyond what the constitution limits them to do.
But before we go, Meles Zinai was sick in hospital away from his country. Reports say he's recovering, and we need to clap our hands for that. If his health is such a serious matter, should it be seriously taken in the region? Should it be sending shadows in the region, and why?
Well, in the first instance, I think the government of Ethiopia owe it to its citizens to tell them details about the health of the head of government, and that's Prime Minister Zenawi.
Head of state, he's an executive prime minister.
Therefore, that situation where they were asking this and nobody is answering, government is denying, and
they arrested a newspaper.
It was very unfortunate, and it should really be an eye opener to many governments in the region that when you are talking about the health of a head of state, it concerns the country and can cause trouble.
When it catches a flu, don't wait.
We've been at this before. Mubarak has been declared dead and alive. With Kabila, what happened to him?
Mugabe.
I think Mugabe. So I think that we've got to begin to be more open about some of these things, because one man's health is important to the entire nation. Ethiopia hosts the African Union. Ethiopia is important for our
fight against coffee in Africa.
for our involvement in Somalia. So I think it's an important country, but also it's a country with very bad democratic credentials. And what an irony that we have African Union there, we have the African Human Rights Commission in the Gambia, where there is a dictator, really.
Yeah, the deaths of the president of Ghana and the president of Zambia in Africa in the recent past has led big lessons for us as Africa. The possibility of the country to continue in peace even when you lose a leader. But of course, for the texture and the profile of a president like Zenawi, a executive prime minister, who you others call a benevolent dictator, he's moving mountains. He may be a bit
his
hard.
country's economy is one of the fastest growing in Africa.
It could be policed by at all levels, but he's pushing. He's generating power. He's doing. So at times there are those of us who used to argue that we need benevolent dictators
to move things in
apart from the so-called electioneering democracy. So now he has been that kind of, because me I'm a believer of the developmental state. I have no problem if you push some things hard. I think Uganda has too much democracy. That's part of the problem. Why do you elect an LOC who can make popular?
Thank you very much, our guest, Mr. Honorable Stephen Birahwa, Chairman of the Parliamentary Commission, the National Congress. Thank you for coming tonight. Vincent Mayanja, Deputy Mr. Nicholas Opiyo. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. Spectrum will be back on Monday. Have a very good weekend. Thank you.